Hey guys, Aaron Kurtz here, and let's talk about stress. Did you know that 75 to 90% of doctors' visits in the US are related to stress? Now, in this video, I'm going to talk about stress from a biological standpoint and how stress, which is a response inside the body, can be caused by stressors that are physical, mental, and emotional. It doesn't matter, the body responds in the same way. Did you know that 70 to 90% of all human disease is related to the activation of the stress response? And did you know that more than 1 out of 5 US Americans are experiencing chronic pain? And of those people, over 50% of them are experiencing significant anxiety and depression. Stress is impacting everyone. And we're seeing this in the rise of inflammation and chronic inflammation in the body, which we now know is responsible for over 50% of all deaths worldwide. This includes cancer, heart disease, diabetes, dementia, suicide. Inflammation is tied very closely to the stress we experience in our life and a lot of the experience that we're having in our life. And so understanding the mechanisms behind stress, the stress response in our body, and inflammation, and the influence we have in this system is really important to our quality of life and really having more health and well-being. So let's start this off by discussing the whole foundation of the stress response in your body and why it's there in the first place. Our bodies have this built-in system that responds to any sort of a stimulus in our environment that can become a stressor that by definition can pull us out of what's called homeostasis in our body. Okay, we're gonna go back to those terms I mentioned earlier, but I want to discuss homeostasis, which is this scientific biological term that describes the equilibrium and a state of balance inside our body on so many levels, from the cellular to the organ to the system-wide to the tissue level, of all these different numbers. We might know these like blood pressure, right? 120 over 80. Maybe fasting blood glucose, 70 to 100. Oxygen saturation, 95 to 100%. Or maybe like cardiac output, which is like 5 to 6 liters per minute. I had looked that one up. There's a lot of numbers that we look at, that doctors look at on a regular basis, but there's so many numbers so many numbers we could just look at in the body on so many levels. We would see that there's a level the body wants to keep us at so that we can stay alive. And if these numbers go outside of these norms, we either causes dysfunction, disease, or death. And so the body really prioritizes keeping this state of balance, homeostasis, throughout the body. And so by definition, anything that threatens to bring us out of homeostasis is termed a stressor. Okay? So a stressor. And this happens every day of our life. We have stressors from just the light that comes into our eyes, from the movement that we do, to the alcohol that we drink, thoughts that run through our mind, people that we interact with. There's so many things that can become a stressor. Now, backing up a little bit, stressors are, in their essence, they're a stimulus. By definition, a stimulus is anything that can create a physical or behavioral response in an organism, so internally inside of us. So everything is a stimulus, everything that we're engaging with. It is our nervous system that picks up stimuli in our environment to keep us safe, right? Hearing a car drive by, listening to the sound of a baby crying, all these different things, there are stimuli coming in, ability to taste, right? 5 senses, coming into our senses that allow us to interpret them. And it's the degree of the stimuli in our internal system, and we'll go into this later, probably another video, our makeup and concepts like our self-image. There's different skills and abilities we have inside of us that determine whether certain stimuli are going to be a stressor, if they're going to threaten to bring us out of homeostasis. This is what the body really wants to do. It wants to keep in a state of balance internally. What happens in response to that threat is what we call stress. The internal mechanisms, hormonal, chemical releases, and response to bring us back to homeostasis. Now, in that response, we're going to call that inflammation, right? So inflammation, which is a Latin word basically to set on fire. And that whole response is, again, to bring us back into homeostasis. Now, acute inflammation is good. It boosts your immune system. It's a healing response. But a chronic inflamed state leads to disease, dysfunction, and death over time. Our bodies have an ability to handle inflammation for long periods of time, but it does create dysfunction and disease in the body. And so there's two types of inflammation, and there's that acute, short-term. You sprained your ankle, you had an infection, your body took care of it, right? But if it persists and your body cannot overcome it, it stays there in your body, and that effect, which we'll talk about a little bit, which the release of hormones and chemicals can destroy and work on your body in a negative way. So in regards to the stress response, it's important to note that yes, stress oftentimes is brought in through our five senses, right? What you can see, what you can smell, taste, touch, all that, hear. But another sense, if you will, and a form of stress is what happens mentally, what we imagine, what we run through our mind. And I would argue this is one of the biggest threats to our time right now. Just with the rise of social media, the bombardment of stimuli that bring about more information into our minds, and almost training our mind to not be in the moment and to be thinking about this or that in the past or future. This is one of the biggest stressors right now, especially among young adults. We're seeing statistics, 18 to 30-year-olds are just seeing a huge rise in anxiety and depression, and even also 30 to 44-year-olds. This is a huge deal and relates to emotional and psychological stress. But in relation to being able to be in the moment and be present in your life really goes counter to the social media and online culture we're seeing, which I'm very much in as well. But our ability to develop these skills are huge, I believe, and have been for myself. Back to the key point is what we imagine, what we run through our mind impacts our physiology. And the point that, like, in the past, maybe a bear or some kind of physical animal threat was what our brain responded to. Right now, we have these primal threats bombarding us at such a higher clip because of our, not just social media has an influence, or it could impact, but just the stress of our daily lives, of living the lifestyles that we live, this Western American life. And with it comes this economic, financial stress that a lot of young people are facing, maybe even threats of loneliness and social isolation, and not having enough social engagement. These are all stressors as well. But these are all interpreted in the body in the same way as the tiger or the bear, right? And so the problem, though, is that these bears don't go away. We're living in this stressed condition, and that's what we'll talk about from a solution standpoint in another video. The general adaptation syndrome was a term developed for the response to these threats in our body. And we know this as a sympathetic nervous system response, where the body will release adrenaline and cortisol, right? And so the general adaptation syndrome is characterized by three phases. There's the alarm phase, And this is where the body starts to gets the signal of the stimuli and the stressors coming in that throws the body out of homeostasis, and the body starts to release the adrenaline, the cortisol, right, to bring it back. Then there's the resistance stage, which is where those chemicals, those reactions bring the body back to homeostasis, back to normal levels. But the exhaustion stage is where this stress remains constant and the body becomes depleted, and that can lead to disease and illness. In the alarm stage, which is that initial stage, the sympathetic nervous system, we know this as the fight or flight, right? It's going to be dumping these adrenaline, cortisol into our bloodstream. It's mobilizing and accessing sugar and putting it into our bloodstream and fatty acids so we have energy, right, in this primal sense to run or to move. You can see it's still this very primal sort of objective to actually physically go do something. The solution is not to physically go away. Okay, so the body doesn't know that. All it knows is that this threat is still there, and we're still getting this sympathetic dumping of adrenaline and cortisol in the body. So with that, we get an increase in heart rate, increase in blood pressure, increase in oxygen to the brain. Our vision gets sharper. If the solution is not brought about, we get this inflammation, which is that response. And these are like what we call cytokines and reactive oxygen species that can wreak havoc on the body. We know over 35% of US adults have chronic inflammation in their body. My question, why do we have so much inflammation? If we understand inflammation as a massive healing response, if we understand bodily symptoms as the body's healing response, which it is, it begs the question, what is the body trying to heal from? What is it about our lifestyles and our internal makeup and who we are that our body is trying to heal from? And so putting the responsibility into ourselves, this is the refrain that I look at this from, is that symptoms are the body's healing response. How can I assist my body in the healing process? Thank you for watching. If you have questions, comments, please comment below. Please share this video with someone who could use this information. And we'll be back with another video about solutions and ways we can improve this response in our body. Thank you.